My coworker framed me for her mistakes and tried to get me fired. She thought I had no way to prove the truth against her asterisk, so I stayed calm and collected everything. She never expected me to keep until the day she was exposed in front of the entire company asterisk. My name is Stella Banderas, and I am 31 years old. The first time I realized something was wrong, it wasn't loud or obvious. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that sits in your chest and makes everything feel slightly off. I was standing in the break room, holding a mug I didn't remember filling, staring at an email on my phone that said I had missed a deadline I knew I had already completed. I remember thinking maybe I was just tired. I'd been tired for a long time. No one said anything to me that day. No one accused me. But when I walked past my manager's office, he glanced up, paused for just a second too long, and then looked back down at his screen like I wasn't worth addressing. That look stayed with me longer than the email did. Before all of this started, my life was steady, not perfect but stable in a way I had worked hard to build. I lived alone in a small apartment above a pharmacy, the kind of place where the floors creaked and the pipes made noises at night like they were trying to speak. I worked as a project coordinator at a mid-sized logistics company. It wasn't glamorous, but it was predictable. I liked predictable. I liked knowing what my day would look like when I woke up. Most mornings I stopped at the same street vendor on the corner outside the office building. He sold tea in paper cups that were always a little too hot to hold. I never caught his name properly. He'd said it once quickly with a smile, and I'd nodded like I understood. After a while we stopped trying. One morning, maybe a few weeks before everything started to fall apart, it was raining harder than usual. The street was half flooded, and I was already late. I ran up to his cart, fumbling with my bag, trying to pull out coins with numb fingers. I dropped them. They scattered into the water at my feet, disappearing instantly. I remember feeling this sudden wave of frustration, way bigger than it should have been. I just stood there, staring down, like that small moment had broken something in me. He didn't say anything. He just reached behind him, poured a cup of tea, and handed it to me. I tried to protest, told him I'd pay the next day, but he shook his head like it didn't matter. Then he did something small I didn't think about at the time. He pulled a piece of cardboard from under the cart and placed it over the water so I could stand without soaking my shoes. It was such a simple thing, practical, thoughtful in a quiet way. I said thank you probably too quickly and ran off. I didn't think about that moment again for a long time. At work, things felt normal on the surface. My desk was the same, third row from the window, slightly crooked chair, the faint hum of the air conditioning unit that never quite worked right. That's where I met Clara. She had joined the company about 6 months before everything started. At first, she felt like the kind of coworker you get lucky to have, friendly without being intrusive, competent, easy to talk to. We started having lunch together sometimes, nothing formal, just small conversations about work, about the city, about things that didn't matter much. She laughed easily. That was the first thing I noticed about her. Looking back, I think I trusted her too quickly. There's a certain comfort in having someone at work who sees you, even a little, especially when your life outside of it feels thinner than it used to. I didn't always talk about my past, but sometimes things slipped out. Little pieces, like how I used to live with my older sister before she moved away, or how my mom had gotten sick years ago, and how everything after that felt like I was constantly catching up to a life that had already moved on without me. Clara listened in a way that felt genuine. She didn't interrupt. She didn't try to fix anything. She just nodded, sometimes resting her chin on her hand like she was trying to understand every detail. It made me feel safe. Which I guess was the first mistake. The missed deadline email came on a Tuesday. I checked my records immediately. The file was there, time-stamped, completed 2 days earlier. At first I thought it was just a system error. I forwarded the file again, added a short explanation and moved on. But then it happened again. A different project, a different client. Same issue. This time I double-checked everything. I went through my sent emails, my saved drafts, even the internal tracking system. The file I had uploaded was gone. Not missing entirely, replaced. There was a newer version in its place, one that looked like mine at a glance but had small changes, enough to shift the responsibility, enough to make it look incomplete. enough to make it look like I had made a mistake. I remember sitting there, staring at the screen, feeling this slow, creeping confusion. I didn't understand how it was possible. When I mentioned it casually to Clara later that afternoon, she frowned slightly, like she was trying to piece something together. "That's weird," she said. "Maybe the system's glitching. It happens sometimes." She said it so easily that I wanted to believe her. So I did. But over the next few weeks, the glitches kept happening. Files disappearing. Deadlines shifting. Emails I swore I had sent somehow never reaching their recipients. Each time it was small enough to explain away. Individually, none of it seemed serious. Together, it started to feel like something else. People at work began to change just slightly. Conversations would stop when I approached. My manager started CCing himself on my tasks more often. Once I overheard someone say, "She used to be really reliable," in a tone that felt like a quiet disappointment. That one hurt more than I expected. The worst part wasn't the mistakes. It was the doubt. I started questioning myself constantly, checking everything twice, then 3 times, staying late to make sure nothing slipped through. I stopped sleeping properly. I stopped calling my sister. I stopped trusting my own memory. And through all of it, Clara stayed the same. Supportive, calm, present. She'd bring me coffee without asking, sit with me when I stayed late, tell me it would pass, that everyone goes through rough patches. There were moments I felt grateful for her in a way that felt almost embarrassing. Like I needed her more than I should. Then one evening, everything shifted just a little too far. I had stayed late again, trying to finish a report that had already been flagged once. The office was nearly empty, just the soft buzz of overhead lights and the distant sound of someone vacuuming down the hall. I got up to refill my water bottle and realized I had left my phone at my desk. When I came back, Clara was sitting in my chair. She wasn't doing anything obvious, just looking at my screen. She turned when she heard me, smiling like it was nothing. "Oh, sorry," she said. "I was just checking the template you used earlier. I thought it might help me with mine." Her tone was casual, normal. But something about it didn't sit right. I nodded anyway, said it was fine. Because at that point I didn't know how not to. That night I went home and couldn't sleep at all. I kept replaying that moment in my head. The way she had been sitting there. The way my screen had already been unlocked. The way she hadn't seemed surprised to be caught. It was the first time I felt it clearly. Not confusion. Not doubt. But something colder. Something sharper. And for the first time, I started to wonder if the problem wasn't me. I just didn't know yet how far it went. The next morning I woke up before my alarm, the kind of wake-up where your body already feels tense, like it knows something your mind hasn't caught up to yet. For a few seconds I just lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the pipes clicking softly behind the walls. My apartment felt smaller than usual, like the air had thickened overnight. I thought about calling in sick. I even picked up my phone, opened the email draft and stared at the empty screen. But then I imagined the look on my manager's face, polite, distant, already halfway to writing me off, and I closed it again. By the time I stepped outside, the street was still damp from the night before. The vendor was already there, setting up his cart like he always did, moving slowly, carefully. When he saw me, he gave a small nod. No big smile, no words, just acknowledgement. I realized I hadn't brought enough cash again. I started to say something, reaching into my bag like I might magically find the money this time, but he had already poured the tea. He handed it to me the same way he had that rainy morning, steady, quiet, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "I'll pay you tomorrow," I said, and even to me it sounded tired. He shrugged lightly like it didn't matter. Then, almost as an afterthought, he tapped the side of the cup with his finger and said, "Careful, it's hot." It was such a small thing, but something about it stuck with me longer than it should have. Not the words, just the way he said them, like he assumed I deserved to be taken care of, even in that tiny, forgettable way. I walked into the office still holding onto that feeling, even as everything else started to chip away at it. The first email was already waiting for me. Subject line, follow up on incomplete submission. My chest tightened before I even opened it. It was the same project I had stayed late to finish, the one Clara had been looking at the night before. The attachment listed in the email wasn't mine. I knew it immediately, even before I opened it. The formatting was slightly off. The numbers didn't align the way I always aligned them. But my name was on it. I felt this strange, hollow sensation, like the ground under me had shifted just enough to throw off my balance. I checked the system. The file I had saved, my file was gone. Replaced again. This time the errors weren't small. They were obvious, careless. The kind that would make anyone question how I still had my job. I didn't panic, not right away. I just sat there, staring at the screen, letting the reality settle in piece by piece. Then I did something I hadn't done before. I didn't fix it. I didn't resend the correct file. Instead, I opened the system logs. At first it was confusing, lines of timestamps and user IDs that blurred together the longer I looked at them, but I forced myself to slow down, to read each entry carefully. There it was. A modification made late the night before. From my account. But the timestamp didn't match when I had been at my desk. I knew exactly when I had left. I remembered the empty office, the quiet, the way I had shut down my computer before grabbing my bag. This edit had been made after that. My hands felt cold. For a second I just sat there, staring at the screen, letting the weight of it sink in. Then, almost automatically, I took a screenshot. I don't know why that was my first instinct. Maybe it was something small, something instinctive, like the way you flinch before you understand what's about to hit you. But I saved it. Then I emailed it to myself. Not my work email, my personal one. I didn't tell anyone. Not my manager, not Clara. Especially not Clara. The rest of the day passed in this strange, detached haze. I responded to emails, attended meetings, nodded when people spoke to me, but everything felt slightly delayed, like I was watching myself from a step behind. At lunch, Clara sat across from me like nothing had changed. She asked if I was okay. I said I was just tired. She tilted her head slightly, studying me. "You've been under a lot of pressure lately," she said. "It's not fair how much they've been piling on you." Her voice was soft, concerned. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt that old instinct to trust her, to tell her everything I had just discovered, to ask her if I was overthinking it. But something stopped me. Not a clear thought, just a feeling. The same quiet, cold feeling I had the night before. So I just nodded and changed the subject. That was the moment everything shifted inside me. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But something closed off. That night I didn't stay late. I packed up at exactly 6, turned off my computer, and as I walked out I did something I hadn't done before. I looked back. Clara was still at her desk. Her screen was angled away, but I could see the reflection in the window behind her. She was typing quickly, focused. For a second I considered going back, asking her directly. But I didn't. I left. At home I opened my laptop and went through everything I could access remotely. Old emails, archived files, timestamps. The pattern started to form slowly. Every mistake traced back to a specific window of time. Late evenings, moments when I had stepped away, times when Clara had been nearby. It wasn't proof. Not yet. But it was enough to make my chest tighten in a way that felt different from before. Not anxiety. Something more solid. More certain. Over the next few days, I changed the way I worked. I stopped leaving my computer unlocked. I started logging out every time I stepped away, even for a minute. I saved copies of everything, locally on a flash drive and in my personal email. Quietly, carefully. I didn't confront her. I didn't accuse anyone. I just watched. And Clara noticed. Not immediately, but slowly. She started asking small questions. Why are you staying so late again? Did you finish that report? Do you want me to double-check anything for you? Each question sounded harmless on its own. Helpful even. But now I heard something else underneath. Something that made me answer carefully. Vaguely. One evening, about a week later, she came over to my desk just as I was packing up. You're leaving already? She asked, glancing at my screen. Yeah, I said, I finished everything earlier. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. That's good, she said, you've been working too hard. There was a pause. Then she added, almost casually, you know, sometimes when people get overwhelmed, they start making mistakes they don't even realize. I looked at her then. Really looked at her. Her expression was calm, concerned. But there was something else there. Something just beneath the surface. I'm not overwhelmed, I said quietly. For a split second, something flickered across her face. Gone almost instantly. She laughed lightly, brushing it off. I didn't mean it like that. But the air between us had shifted. We both felt it. That night I couldn't stop thinking about what she had said. Not the words themselves. The certainty behind them. Like she already knew something I didn't. Or thought she did. A few days later, I made a mistake on purpose. It was small, a formatting error in a document that would normally go unnoticed. I saved the file, logged out, and left my desk. But I didn't leave the office. I waited. Down the hall near the stairwell, where I could see the reflection of my desk in the glass panel by the elevators. It felt ridiculous at first, paranoid. I almost walked away. Then I saw her. Clara stood up from her desk slowly, looking around like she was checking if anyone was watching. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. She walked over to my desk, sat down, and without hesitation she moved the mouse. My screen lit up. I stopped breathing. She didn't hesitate, didn't look confused. She knew exactly what she was doing. She opened the file, paused for a second, then started typing, not fixing the error, making it worse, deliberately, carefully. My hands were shaking, but I didn't move. I didn't confront her. I just stood there, watching the reflection, letting the reality settle into something undeniable. After a minute, she closed the file, locked the screen and walked back to her desk like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just rewritten the past in a way that would make me look incompetent. Like she hadn't just proven everything I had been too afraid to believe. I waited another 5 minutes before walking back. Sat down, opened the files, and there it was. The changes, exactly as I had seen them. I took a screenshot, saved it, emailed it to myself. Then I just sat there, staring at the screen, feeling something inside me shift again. But this time it wasn't fear. It was something quieter, colder, a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. For weeks I had been questioning myself, doubting my memory, wondering if I was losing control. But now I knew, and knowing changed everything. I didn't cry. Not yet. That came later. That came when I realized this wasn't just about work. It wasn't just about mistakes or deadlines or office politics. It was about trust, and how easily I had given mine to someone who had never intended to keep it. The next morning I stopped at the tea cart again. This time I had enough money. I handed it to him before he could say anything. He looked at me for a second, then gave a small nod. As he passed me the cup, he said something I hadn't heard him say before. Some people, he said quietly, they take what is easy. I frowned slightly, not fully understanding. He didn't explain, just turned back to his cart. I walked away, holding the cup in both hands, the heat seeping into my skin. At the time, I thought he was just talking about something random, something unrelated. I didn't realize yet how much those words would matter, or how much I was about to lose before I understood them. The first time I cried about it, it wasn't at work. It was at home, sitting on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, still wearing my shoes. I had just finished going through another set of files, comparing versions, timestamps, edits. My laptop was open in front of me, the screen casting this cold, pale light across the room. Everything felt too quiet. There was no dramatic moment, no sudden breakdown. It was just this slow realization settling into me, piece by piece, until there was no space left to hold it. Clara wasn't just interfering with my work. She was dismantling it. Carefully, repeatedly, in ways that made it look like I was doing it to myself. And I had let her. That was the part that hurt the most. Not just that she was doing it, but that I had trusted her enough to give her access to those moments. The unlocked screens, the casual conversations, the easy proximity. I pressed my palms into my eyes, trying to stop the tears before they started, but it didn't work. They came anyway. Quiet at first, then harder until I had to cover my mouth just to keep from making noise. There's something deeply humiliating about crying alone, not because anyone sees it but because no one does. No one knows. No one comes. Eventually, I wiped my face, closed the laptop, and just sat there until everything felt numb again. The next day, I went to work like nothing had happened. That became my routine. Collect evidence. Go home. Break quietly. Repeat. I stopped trying to fix the damage immediately. Instead, I let some of it sit just long enough to be noticed, not enough to get me in serious trouble, but enough to build a visible pattern. At the same time, I kept everything she touched. Screenshots, file versions, access logs. I started carrying a small flash drive with me everywhere. It felt almost ridiculous at first, like I was overreacting, but each time I added another file to it, another piece of proof, it felt less like paranoia and more like survival. Clara, on the other hand, seemed lighter, happier even. She laughed more during meetings, took on new responsibilities, volunteered to help others with their tasks. People started noticing her in a way they hadn't before. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the balance shifted. Where I had once been the reliable one, the steady presence, she was becoming that person now. It happened so gradually that if I hadn't been paying attention, I might have missed it. But I saw it. Every compliment she received. Every nod of approval from management. Every time someone said, "Clara handled it," instead of my name. It wasn't just about bringing me down. It was about replacing me. The realization didn't come all at once. It settled in slowly, like everything else had. And when it did, it changed something inside me again. Because now it wasn't just confusion or hurt. It was grief. A quiet kind of grief for a version of my life that was slipping away without anyone acknowledging it. Around that time, my sister called. I hadn't spoken to her in weeks. Her name lit up on my phone while I was sitting at my desk, staring at an email I couldn't bring myself to open. For a second, I considered letting it ring out. But I answered. "Hey," she said, her voice warm, familiar in a way that made something in my chest ache. "Hey," I replied, trying to sound normal. "You've been quiet," she said, not accusing, just noticing. "I've been busy." There was a pause. "You always say that when something's wrong." I let out a small breath, leaning back in my chair. "It's just work," I said, "nothing serious." Another pause, longer this time. "You don't have to carry everything alone, Stella." The words landed harder than I expected. For a moment, I almost told her everything. About Clara. About the files. About the way I felt like I was slowly disappearing inside my own life. But I didn't, because saying it out loud would make it real in a way I wasn't ready for. I know, I said instead. We talked a little longer after that, about small things, safe things. When we hung up, I stared at my phone for a while, feeling this strange mix of comfort and distance. My sister had always been the one who noticed things, even when I tried to hide them, especially then. But there were parts of my life she didn't know, parts I had never told anyone, not because I was hiding something terrible, just because I didn't know how to explain it without sounding weak. Years ago, when my mom got sick, everything had shifted overnight. I had been the one who stayed, the one who handled appointments, medications, bills. My sister had moved away before things got worse, and I told her it was fine, that I could manage. And I did. For a long time. Until my mom passed. After that, something in me never fully reset. I kept going because that's what I knew how to do. Keep things together. Be reliable. Be the person no one had to worry about. That identity had followed me into every part of my life, including work. So when that started to crack, it wasn't just about losing a job. It felt like losing the one thing I knew how to be. A few days later, something happened that I hadn't planned for. My manager called me into his office. It wasn't unexpected. If anything, I had been waiting for it. Still, my hands felt cold as I knocked on the door. "Come in," he said. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. He gestured to the chair across from him. I sat. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He looked tired, more than usual. "I'm going to be direct," he said finally. "There have been concerns about your recent performance." I nodded slowly. "I understand." He studied me for a second, like he was trying to gauge my reaction. "This isn't like you," he continued. "You've always been one of our most dependable people." The word "been" lingered in the air. Past tense. I swallowed. "I know. We've had multiple reports of missed deadlines, incorrect submissions," he trailed off slightly, "and clients have started to notice." I kept my expression steady, even as something inside me tightened. "I've been dealing with some issues in the system," I said carefully. He frowned slightly. "What kind of issues?" I hesitated. This was the moment. The one where I could say everything. Lay it all out. But I didn't. Not yet. "I'm still looking into it," I said instead. His expression shifted just a little. Not anger. Disappointment. "Stella," he said, leaning forward slightly, "I need you to understand how serious this is. We can't keep making excuses to clients." "I'm not making excuses," I said quietly. The words came out sharper than I intended. There was a brief silence. Then he leaned back, exhaling. "I'm putting you on a performance review," he said. The words landed with a dull, heavy weight. Not surprising, but still enough to make something in my chest drop. "We'll reassess in a few weeks," he added, "but you need to show immediate improvement." I nodded. "I will." The meeting ended quickly after that. No raised voices. No dramatic confrontation. Just a quiet shift in how I was seen. When I stepped out of his office, Clara was at her desk. She looked up as I walked past. For a second, our eyes met. And she smiled. Not a big smile. Just a small, knowing one. Like she had been expecting this. Like this was exactly where she wanted me to be. That was the moment something inside me broke completely. Not in a loud way. Not in a way anyone else could see. But in a way that left no room for doubt. This wasn't random. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was intentional. And I was running out of time. That night I didn't cry. I didn't open my laptop. I didn't go through files or screenshots or logs. I just sat by the window in my apartment, watching the street below, the occasional headlights passing through the darkness. For the first time in weeks, I let myself feel something other than fear or confusion. Anger, not explosive, not reckless, just steady, controlled, the kind that doesn't fade, the kind that waits. And for the first time since this started, I stopped thinking about how to survive it, and started thinking about how to end it. The next morning felt strangely calm, not peaceful, just clear, like something inside me had finally stopped fighting itself. I didn't rush getting ready. I made my bed, washed my cup from the night before, even opened the window for a few minutes to let the air move through the apartment. Small things I hadn't had the energy for in weeks. When I stepped outside, the street was quieter than usual. The vendor was already there. Adjusting the lid on one of his kettles, steam curled up into the cool morning air. I walked up to him and placed the money on the counter before he could say anything. "For yesterday," I said. He looked at the coins, then at me, like he was measuring something he didn't say out loud. "You look different today," he said. I let out a small breath. "I feel different." He nodded once, like that was enough explanation. As he handed me the tea, he paused for just a second, then reached under the cart and pulled out something I hadn't noticed before, a thin piece of cloth folded neatly. He placed it on the edge of the cart. "For your hands," he said, "sometimes heat stays longer than you expect." I frowned slightly, not fully understanding, but I took it anyway. "Thank you." He didn't respond, just turned back to his cart like the conversation was already over. I carried the cloth with me all the way to the office. I didn't realize yet how much I would need it. By the time I got to my desk, Clara was already there. She glanced up as I sat down, her expression warm, familiar. "Morning," she said. "Morning." I didn't stop to talk, didn't linger. I logged in, opened my files and started working. But this time everything was different. Not because the situation had changed. Because I had. For weeks I had been reacting. Fixing. Catching up. Trying to keep control over something that had already been slipping through my fingers. Now I wasn't trying to stop her anymore. I was letting her continue. Carefully. Deliberately. Because this time I was ready for it. I created a new project file that morning, one that looked routine on the surface, nothing that would draw attention. Inside it, I made a few small intentional inconsistencies. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to create a pattern if someone tampered with it. Then I saved it. Logged out. And stood up. "I'm grabbing coffee," I said, not looking directly at Clara. "Want me to come?" she asked almost immediately. There was a slight eagerness in her voice. I shook my head. "I'll be quick." I walked away before she could say anything else. But I didn't go to the cafe. I went to the stairwell. Same place as before. Same angle where I could see the reflection of my desk in the glass. My heart was steady this time. No shaking. No second guessing. I waited. It didn't take long. Clara stood up. Looked around. Walked to my desk. Sat down. The movements were so familiar now, they almost felt routine. She woke the screen. Opened the files. Paused. Then started typing. Precise, controlled. Like she had done this dozens of times. Which she probably had. I watched everything. Every keystroke. Every pause. Every small adjustment she made to shift the responsibility just slightly out of place. When she finished, she closed the file, locked the screen and went back to her desk. Same as always. Except this time I wasn't just watching. This time I had prepared for it. I walked back after a few minutes, sat down and opened the file. The changes were there. Exactly as expected. I didn't react. Didn't fix anything. I just opened a program she didn't know I had installed, a screen recording tool that had been running in the background since I logged in that morning. I saved the footage, copied it to my flash drive, emailed it to myself. Then I leaned back in my chair and let out a slow breath. For the first time since this started, I felt something close to control. Not complete, but enough. The next few days followed the same pattern. I created opportunities. She took them. Each time I collected more recordings, more logs, more proof that couldn't be explained away as coincidence or error. And the more I gathered, the more something else started to settle in. Not just anger, understanding. Clara wasn't careless. She wasn't impulsive. She was patient, calculated. She knew exactly how far to push things without drawing attention, which meant this wasn't new. She had done this before. That thought stayed with me longer than anything else, because it changed how I saw her, not as someone reacting to me, but as someone following a pattern. A few days later, something unexpected happened. I came back from lunch early. I wasn't planning to catch her. I just wasn't hungry. When I stepped into the office, it was quieter than usual. Most people were still out. Clara was at her desk, or at least that's where she should have been. But she was at mine. Again. This time I didn't watch from a distance. I saw it directly. Her back to me. My screen open. Her hands on my keyboard. For a second, everything slowed. Not in a dramatic way. Just enough for me to take in the details. The way she leaned slightly forward. The way her fingers moved without hesitation. The way she didn't even consider the possibility of being seen. I stepped forward. Clara. My voice was calm. Steady. She froze. Just for a fraction of a second. Then she turned. And smiled. Oh, she said lightly, like this was nothing. I was just... Don't, I interrupted. The word came out quieter than I expected. But it stopped her. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air between us felt heavier than anything I had experienced in weeks. Then she leaned back in my chair slightly, crossing one leg over the other. Relaxed. Comfortable. You're being really tense lately, she said. I was trying to help. I looked at the screen. At the open files. At the changes she had already started making. Then back at her. By doing my work for me, I asked. She tilted her head, like she was considering how to respond. By fixing things before they become bigger problems. The words were smooth. Practiced. I felt something in my chest tighten, but I kept my voice even. I didn't ask you to. You didn't have to, she said. Another small smile. That's what colleagues do. There it was again. That quiet certainty. Like she believed what she was saying. Or at least believed she could make me believe it. I stepped closer. Not aggressively. Just enough to stand beside my desk. You've been accessing my files without permission, I said. It wasn't a question. Her expression didn't change. If your files are incomplete, it affects the whole team. That's not what I said. She shrugged lightly. You're under review, Stella. I thought you appreciate the help. The words hit harder than they should have. Not because of what they meant. Because of how easily she used them. Like my situation was just another tool for her. I looked at her for a long moment. Really looked. And for the first time I saw it clearly. Not just what she was doing. But why. It wasn't just about work. It wasn't just about replacing me. It was about control. About being the person everyone relied on. The person no one questioned. The person I used to be. You should get back to your desk, I said finally. My voice was calm. Flat. For a second, something flickered in her eyes. Not fear. Something closer to irritation. But she stood up anyway. Of course, she said, smoothing out her sleeve. As she walked past me, she paused slightly. Just try not to fall behind again, she added quietly. Then she went back to her desk. Like nothing had happened. I stood there for a moment, staring at my screen. At the half-finished changes she had started. Then I sat down. Opened my recording. Saved it. Added it to the others. My hands were steady. My breathing evened. Because now it wasn't just suspicion. It wasn't just patterns or assumptions. It was direct. Clear. Undeniable. And for the first time, I understood something that shifted everything. Clara didn't think she would get caught. Not because she was careful. Because she believed I wouldn't do anything about it. That I would stay quiet. Keep fixing. Keep absorbing the damage. Like I always had. Like I did when my mom was sick. Like I did when everything fell apart and I just kept going. But this time was different. This time I wasn't going to carry it. I reached into my bag and pulled out the cloth the vendor had given me that morning. It was simple, worn at the edges. I wrapped it around my hand without really thinking about why. The warmth from the tea had faded by then. But the feeling stayed. Sometimes heat stays longer than you expect. I finally understood what he meant. Because this wasn't just about what Clara had done. It was about everything I had been holding onto for years. All the quiet moments. All the things I never said. All the times I let things pass because it felt easier than confronting them. That heat had been building for a long time. And now it wasn't going anywhere. I looked at my screen one last time. Then minimized everything. And opened a new document. Not a work file. Something else. Something that would finally put all of this where it belonged. Not hidden. Not twisted. But seen. Because I wasn't just going to prove what she had done. I was going to make sure everyone else saw it too. And this time I wasn't going to do it quietly. The day everything came out wasn't loud the way I used to imagine it would be. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation, no moment where the entire office turned at once and gasped like something out of a movie. It was quieter than that. Almost ordinary. I woke up before my alarm again, but this time the tension wasn't there. My body didn't feel like it was bracing for something. It felt settled. Like I had already decided how things would end. I got ready slowly, the same way I had the morning before. The same small routines, the same quiet movements around my apartment. When I stepped outside, the air was cooler, the kind of morning where everything feels sharper, more defined. The vendor was already there. He looked up as I approached, and for a second neither of us said anything. Then he poured the tea. I placed the money down without thinking. As he handed me the cup, his fingers paused for just a second longer than usual. Today, he asked. Just that one word. I nodded. He didn't smile, didn't ask anything else. Just said, then don't rush. I carried that with me all the way to the office. Don't rush. For once I didn't. I didn't start my day by opening emails or checking files. I sat at my desk, took out my flash drive and looked at it for a long moment. Everything was there. Weeks of recordings, screenshots, logs, timestamps. Every quiet moment she thought no one would ever see. I had spent so long collecting it that it almost didn't feel real anymore. Like something separate from me. But it was. It was mine. And it was time. I sent a meeting request to my manager. Subject, documentation regarding system discrepancies. Neutral, professional, unremarkable. He responded within a few minutes. Come in at 10. Clara was at her desk when I stood up. She glanced at me briefly, then back to her screen. No smile this time. No small talk. Something had shifted in her too. Maybe she sensed it. Maybe she didn't. I didn't try to figure it out. I walked to my manager's office and knocked. Come in. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. He gestured to the chair. I sat down. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I wanted to follow up on the performance review, I said, keeping my voice steady. He nodded slightly. Have you made progress? Yes, I said, but not in the way you think. That got his attention. I placed the flash drive on his desk. There's been consistent interference with my work, I continued. I didn't want to bring it up without proof. His expression shifted slightly. Interference. I nodded. File modifications, unauthorized access, deliberate changes after submission. He leaned back, studying me carefully. That's a serious claim, Stella. I know. I slid the flash drive closer to him. Everything is documented. He didn't touch it right away. Who are you accusing? He asked. I held his gaze. Clara. The name sat between us, heavy but not explosive. He didn't react immediately. Didn't dismiss it either. Instead, he reached for the drive. Walk me through it, he said. So I did. Not emotionally. Not dramatically. Just facts. Timestamps. Recordings. Patterns. I showed him the logs first. Then the screenshots. Then the videos. The first one he watched in silence. The second he leaned forward slightly. By the third his jaw tightened. He didn't interrupt. Didn't ask questions until the end. When the last video finished, the room felt different. Not tense. Just clear. He sat back slowly, exhaling through his nose. How long has this been happening? He asked. Since shortly after she joined, I said. And you didn't report it earlier because... I hesitated. Not because I didn't have an answer. Because I had too many. I needed to be sure, I said finally. He nodded once. Like he understood more than I had said. Stay here, he said, standing up. He picked up the flash drive and walked out of the office. The door closed behind him. And for the first time in weeks, I was completely still. No tension. No fear. Just waiting. It took about 15 minutes. Long enough for my thoughts to drift somewhere unexpected. Back to my mom. Back to those long nights in the hospital, where everything felt uncertain, but I stayed anyway because leaving wasn't an option. Back to the version of me who thought holding everything together was the only way to survive. I realized, sitting there, that I had carried that version of myself into everything. Including this. I had stayed quiet because that's what I knew. Because speaking up felt like breaking, something I wasn't allowed to break. But some things need to break. Some things only make sense after they do. The door opened. My manager stepped back in. Clara was behind him. Her expression was composed. Almost calm. For a second our eyes met. And I saw it. Not panic. Not fear. Something closer to disbelief. Like she hadn't expected this. Not from me. Sit down, my manager said to her. She did. Across from me. The same seat I had been in minutes earlier. There was a brief silence. Then he spoke. We've reviewed the documentation Stella provided, he said evenly. Clara didn't look at him. She looked at me. You went through my files, she asked quietly. The question almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny. Because of how completely she had flipped it. I documented access to mine, I said. Her lips pressed together slightly. "This is a misunderstanding," she said, turning back to him. "I was trying to help, she's been struggling." He held up a hand. "Clara, just her name." But it stopped her. He turned his monitor slightly so she could see. Paused one of the videos. Her at my desk. Clear, undeniable. The room went very still. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then leaned back slowly. And something in her expression changed. The calm slipped. Not completely, but enough. "You don't understand," she said. It wasn't defensive. Not exactly. More tired. "Then explain it," he said. There was a pause. And for a second, I thought she would deny everything. Deflect, shift blame, do what she had been doing all along. But she didn't. Instead, she let out a small breath. "I've seen this before," she said quietly. Neither of us responded. "She reminds me of someone I used to work with," she continued, her eyes still on the screen. "Same pattern, reliable, quiet, everyone trusts them. And then one day everything starts slipping and no one notices until it's too late." I frowned slightly. "That's not—" "I wasn't trying to ruin you," she interrupted, finally looking at me. "I was trying to get ahead of it." The words didn't make sense. "Not at first." "What are you talking about?" I asked. She hesitated. And that's when I saw it. Not manipulation. Not calculation. Something else. Something closer to fear. "My last job," she said slowly, "I trusted someone like you, I covered for them, fixed things quietly, thought I was helping." Her voice tightened slightly. "They lost a client, then another, and when everything came out I was the one blamed for not reporting it sooner." The room felt heavier. "I lost everything," she said. "My position, my references, it followed me here." There was a long silence. "I saw the signs again," she continued. "Missed deadlines, errors, the same pattern." I shook my head. "That's because you were creating them." "I was preventing worse," she said almost sharply. "If you slipped, it would reflect on all of us. I wasn't going to let that happen again." Her logic twisted in on itself. But to her it made sense. I could see that now. "I didn't think you'd notice," she added quietly. That part landed differently. Not arrogant. Just honest. "I thought you'd just keep fixing it," she said. And there it was. The truth underneath everything. Not just what she had done, but what she believed about me. That I would stay quiet. That I would carry it. That I wouldn't push back. For a moment I didn't feel anger. Just something heavier. Something sadder. "I almost did," I said. Her eyes flickered slightly. "But I didn't," I added. Another silence. Then my manager spoke. "This will be handled by HR," he said firmly. "Effective immediately, your access is revoked pending investigation." Clara didn't argue. Didn't protest. She just nodded once. Like she had already known this was coming. When she stood up, she paused briefly. Looked at me one last time. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," she said. I didn't respond. Because at that point, it didn't matter. She left. The door closed. And just like that it was over. Or at least the part of it that involved her. The rest took time. HR meetings, formal statements, reviews. In the end, the evidence was too clear. She was terminated. Quietly. No announcement. No company-wide email. Just gone. My performance review was lifted. My name cleared. But things didn't go back to how they were. They couldn't. Because I wasn't the same person anymore. People treated me differently. More carefully. Like they weren't entirely sure what had happened, just that something had. And I didn't correct them. I didn't explain. I just did my work. Steady, quiet. But not the same. A few weeks later, I saw something I hadn't expected. A message from Clara. Short. No explanation. Just, I was wrong about you. I stared at it for a long time. Then closed it. Didn't reply. Not out of anger. Just because there was nothing left to say. That evening I stopped at the tea cart again. The vendor looked up as I approached. You didn't rush, he said. I shook my head. No. He poured the tea. Handed it to me. I hesitated for a second, then asked, why do you keep giving people things before they ask? He shrugged lightly. Because sometimes they don't know how. I thought about that for a moment. About the cardboard in the rain. The cloth for the heat. The quiet understanding of things I hadn't said out loud. I think you knew, I said. He smiled slightly. Maybe. I stood there for a while, holding the cup, feeling the warmth settle into my hands. Not overwhelming. Not burning. Just there. Steady. Then I nodded, said thank you and walked away. That night back in my apartment, I opened my laptop. Not to check work. Not to review files. Just to sit in the quiet. For the first time in a long time, nothing felt like it was slipping. Nothing felt like it needed to be held together. And I realized something I hadn't understood before. It wasn't strength that had kept me silent all those years. It was habit. The same habit that almost let someone else rewrite my life without me noticing. But not this time. This time I saw it. I kept it. I ended it. And I didn't do it alone. Even if it took me a while to understand that.